everybody. So it's Saturday, it's peeing it down. I've just had my mum and Sue come with a TV. Brilliant result. So that's great. And so I thought this is a good opportunity to do a video because I probably won't do one tomorrow because I doubt much will happen. But I'm going to explain how I think my eating disorder started. Because I've chosen the Full Recovery Programme, I have one more group to go to a week called the Full Recovery Group. Glue's in the name. And the next class on Tuesday, there's only 6 of us in this group, I'll hasten to add. But we have to basically talk about how we think our eating disorder began. So I've been putting pen to paper, going through my past and trying to link things together. And I think, to be honest, I've more or less cracked it. I'm going to show it to my therapist and see what she thinks, but I think I'm there basically. So I'll start with school. I'd like to say that I loved school. I had a great bunch of friends who I still keep in contact with today. I love them to pieces. Was never bullied, never any bad experiences basically, but I was constantly comparing myself to my peers and my friends, and I was always dissatisfied with my academic performance. A lot of the friends I had that were closest to me were extremely clever and intelligent, bright, funny people. So I'd compare myself to them socially, academically, physically, in any way I could, I would compare. And I never did quite as well as they did with work, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I revised, I never did as well. And because I never did just as well as they did, I considered it just a total failure. And that was the kind of start of my black and white thinking. It was all or nothing. And the more I tried and the more I failed, the more my self-esteem just plummeted. And in the end, I just thought, what's the point anymore? Because I always felt a constant need to please other people, teachers, mum, dad, friends, and to prove myself to other people. It was never I was never doing it for me. I was always doing it for other people, basically. So that was that with school. And then you throw dancing into the mix, which is a huge part of my life again. This was something that I found that I had a natural gift for, and I don't mind sort of blowing my own trumpet about this because I was naturally flexible, naturally turned out, and had a natural line as well, which is something that's really important in dance. And so for the first time, I found something that I never really had to try very hard at. I mean, I struggled at times with technique and things like that, and remembering routines, of course, there's that to it, but I found it, I loved doing it. It came easy for the most part. But despite this talent that I had, I didn't have the body figure to match it, especially not for a ballerina, which, there was a point in my life when I thought, oh, maybe I could be a ballerina. But knowing how my body image is naturally, I knew that I could never achieve that, because when it comes to castings and auditions, no matter how gifted you are, your body image and your body type is always going to play a part. It's as sad as that, unfortunately. And then you take into account how many hours a week you're spending in front of a mirror in a studio with other girls who are naturally slim. Your anxiety builds up, your self-esteem goes down, and for the most part, for my late teen years, I was uncomfortable with the way I looked. You go through puberty anyway, which is hard enough, but doing it in front of mirrors every day, it's 10 times harder. So I was always very self-conscious of me, basically. So then it came to kind of like my uni years, and I'd gone for auditions to go to performing arts schools around 18, 19, and it was around the time that I found out my mum was ill with multiple sclerosis. I decided not to follow the dance route, not because of the illness that my mum had, but because I knew that I didn't have a thick enough skin and my heart wasn't in it, and if that's the case, you're never going to make it in the dance world. You need those things, basically. So then I decided, well, I'll please a certain number of people and try and go to uni. I knew it was never for me deep down, considering how hard I'd found school. I thought uni, definitely not. But I gave it a go to keep other people happy, and I thought, well, I might really like it and it might create a new pathway for me. So I went to Leeds Met for a year to do events management, but I didn't do the conventional thing of going into halls. I stayed in a really cool house with some really nice mates, which I actually, I preferred doing it that way because I was going into it a little bit old. I think I was maybe a year older than most of the other first years, because I'd had a year out, etc. But I was never into the uni culture. I'd never been a big drinker, and because of the house, I found it hard to make friends at uni. I wasn't in halls with, my own sort of classmates or anything. And I had an extreme pressure to do well. I put that on myself basically because I wanted to prove that if I was going to go to uni, then I was going to do it right. I wasn't going to doss about in my first year like I know a lot of people do. But the pressure that I put on myself was so extreme that I was comfort eating, I was spending increasing amounts of time on my own, and I was generally very unhappy. And it got to Christmas and I was having panic attacks, huge anxiety. I went home for the holidays and I didn't know what to do. I was a total wreck. And I said to my mum, when I go back, I'm going to join the gym, lose some weight, and hopefully feel more like me. So went back, and at first started going to the gym maybe 3 times a week for about an hour, doing it really healthily in moderation. But the addictive personality side to me loved seeing the sort of numbers go up on the treadmill with regard to, how many calories I'd burnt. And the next day I'd make sure that I'd burnt maybe 50 more calories than I had the day before. And it was a game. It was just a numbers game. It was addictive. I couldn't help it at all. I enjoyed it as well, I'd like to say, and I was eating healthily still at this point. And little by little, the weight dropped off. And for the first time in ages, I kind of found myself thinking, oh, you're doing something right for once. And I started to come home, because everyone had been saying, oh, I really want to lose weight, or you'd read it in a magazine, I really want to lose weight, but I can't, I don't have the motivation, and I don't have the willpower. But I was doing it, and, I could see the numbers going up on the treadmill and down on the weighing scales. It was just a total numbers game. And then things kind of got a bit worse because I started to increase my hours at the gym. And when I came home, I was ready for my dinner, but I kind of caught myself thinking, well, you've just put in all this hard work, burnt off however many calories. Why are you going to undo that by, having tea? So at first I started to maybe restrict my food at dinner, so as not to feel like I'd just totally undone all the hard work that I'd done at the gym. And the weight dropped off more and more. And I was spurred on by the fact that, like I said, so many people were saying they were struggling to lose weight, but here I was doing it really quite easily, but cheating by restricting my food intake. So this went on. I'd go to the gym more and I'd restrict my food more, basically. And it got to my birthday at the end of June, and my best friend Lucy, who hadn't seen me in a while, realised something was wrong because of the amount of weight that I'd lost in a fairly short amount of time. But it wasn't till I went to New York that summer that I realised something was wrong. I went to New York with my mum and brother for 5 days, and I was in a mess the whole time. I'd stress and cry over meals. Where are we going to eat? What am I going to have? Starting the comparison with food, this is healthier than that, but I'd much prefer this. Torturing myself, basically. And the whole holiday was a nightmare. I couldn't enjoy it. I made it hell on earth for my brother and mum. I'll never really forgive myself for that because it was terrible. And they hated me, basically, and I didn't blame them. The last day, I don't think I barely spoke a word to either of them. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And what happened was the eating disorder voice was basically shouting at me anytime I felt hungry or wanted to eat. And then when I did eat, sort of the voice would scream at me, and the guilt and self-loathing that followed was just unbearable. And I felt like a failure for succumbing to food, having done so well and losing weight. And basically I was just unravelling the hard work that I'd done to lose the weight that I had done so far. But the voice convinced me that this is what I wanted. But then it became obsessional to the point where I'd scared myself into eating anything at all just to shut the voice up. And I'd begin to get these really irrational thoughts like, well, as soon as I start to eat something, even if it's just an apple, I'm going to put on 5 stone overnight. The irrational thoughts that I was thinking were just ridiculous, which is kind of why I think I have a stronger approach to getting better this time, because I know that is just really irrational. And I've been there and worn the t-shirt kind of thing. And then by the end, the only way that I could shut the voice up was either by not eating at all or eating just enough to survive, but to keep the voice as like a faint whisper so it wasn't torturing me the whole time. At this point, my weight had, after that, I was in this basically addictive cycle of not eating, losing weight, not eating, losing weight, and I couldn't get out of it, and I was desperate to eat. I was in pain. I was absolutely traumatized by everything. It was horrific. And it got to September. I collapsed at home. My mum, you can imagine, was just in tears, and it was horrible. And the ambulance came, took me to hospital. I came home a couple of days later, but I had a doctor's appointment to go to, and I went, and he basically said there and then, this can't go on, I'm going to admit you. And I went to Airedale Hospital. My BMI at this point was at 13, and I weighed just over 5 stone. I have a picture, which I'll probably show at some point later, but I mean, you wouldn't recognise me. I was skeletal. At this point, I won't go into how this happened, but my partner at the time basically helped me recover from this. He cooked for me, and he helped me eat and helped me to enjoy food, which was something that I couldn't have done without him. My mum wasn't well enough to get me better. She wasn't well enough to cook. So I owed a lot to him for getting me physically better. But it happened very quick. And I don't think I was ready to get better. A part of me still wanted to cling on to this eating disorder, which had formed part of my identity at this point. But I got better physically, but kind of like the seed that had been sown all those months ago was still there, essentially. Or years ago, even, if you take it back to my school days. And I never really learned to trust my body, or my mind, which is why I've relapsed again. I was using my eating disorder to avoid facing difficult emotions or situations, and I was using it as a distraction so that I just didn't have to deal with whatever I was feeling at the time, basically. A lot of people might say that my mum's illness is a triggering factor, and I have a lot of emotions to deal with because of that. Yes, it's a part of it, but so is everything else in life. You know, work, relationships, money, stress, job, family, friends. It all plays its part. If you don't want to deal with something, whereas somebody else might go for a walk to avoid it or do knitting or something, I turn to my eating disorder. Whereas this is a huge part of my recovery, will be learning how to just be with myself and just to sit with myself. Because once you strip away the eating disorder and the negative behaviours, which is what happens in here, it unravels everything else, and you ask yourself, well, what are you left with? What is it that this eating disorder has been covering up and masking? And what I found is, whereas at home, if I had a spare hour, I might kind of, do some sort of destructive behaviour or really restrict my food. Here, I can't do that, and I've got to just learn to sit and be with myself, which is very awkward, and I find it very, very hard, because I have to face whatever it is that I don't want to face at the time, whether it just be boredom even, I have to learn to cope with that, basically, and just allow myself to be myself and learn to deal and manage all my thoughts and feelings as like a normal individual without using the eating disorder. But most importantly, and this is like the pinnacle point here, I have to kind of learn to trust my own body and my own mind, because after years and years of ignoring and avoiding my own and soaking everyone else's in, because, I trusted their opinions and judgments more than I trusted my own, I don't know what I should be thinking, how I should be thinking it, if it's right to think this, if it's wrong to think that. And I basically have to kind of learn to be me again. I know this sounds very weird, and it can come across as very strange, and it's not with regard to every aspect of my life, but basically just learning to trust myself, and that if I eat at McDonald's, no, I'm not going to grow an extra arse, or my stomach won't grow, an extra, roll of fat or whatever, anything, because that is just ridiculous. That is just irrational to the point of insanity. But that is what this illness does to you. It's poisonous to your mind and your brain and your thinking, and so that is my aim for when I leave here, is to be able to stand on my own 2 feet and trust my own judgments and opinions, accept that other people are allowed theirs, but I don't necessarily have to agree or follow them, and hopefully it will make for a much healthier and happier Harriet. So I hope this video has been interesting and insightful. Probably not helpful, but it's just what I believe, what factors in my life have contributed to me getting this illness. Because certain people can be in what I would like to say sort of like they're a classic case for getting an eating disorder, basically. And if you look at the dancing, and if you look at, I suppose family troubles, everything like that, you throw that into a bag and you shake it about, and, the likelihood of me getting an eating disorder is quite high. So, yeah, it is really interesting. So that's that. I'm sure there's some more work to go. I mean, that is really basic, because if I went into it in detail, I'd go on for hours. So I better cut it short there. So yeah, let me know what you think anyway. And I probably won't do a video tomorrow, but I will see you next week. Have a good weekend. Bye, guys.